Starting in mid-November 2023, Iranian-backed Houthi rebels based in Yemen have carried out a series of attacks on commercial vessels traversing through the Red Sea. Starting with the dramatic seizure of the 48,000-ton car carrier, the Galaxy Leader, the next month would see the Houthis attack several other ships with Iranian-made missiles and drones, as well as another attempt to seize the ship. American ships in the Red Sea have been attempting to thwart these attacks and have intercepted many of these missiles and drones. Their efforts have not been enough to stop the onslaught, and on December 18th, the United States announced Operation Prosperity Guardian, a multinational effort to increase maritime security in the Red Sea. In this video, I will be examining the background of the Houthi movement in Yemen, why they are attacking commercial vessels in the Red Sea, the timeline of the attacks, the effects of the attacks on the region, and what Operation Prosperity Guardian means for maritime security in the Red Sea. But first, let's get some background on the Houthi movement in Yemen. The Houthi movement has existed since 1994 and started an insurgency in Yemen in 2004. The group is composed primarily of Shia Muslims and espouses an ideology very similar to Iran's. The group's motto is God is the greatest, death to America, death to Israel. The group has waged a full-blown civil war against the internationally recognized Republic of Yemen since 2014. They have fought against government forces and later Saudi Arabian forces since then. The group controls around a third of Yemen's territory, but 70 to 80% of its population, including the capital Sana'a and the major Red Sea port city of Al Hudaydah. Due to their similar ideologies and Shia Muslim beliefs, the Houthis have received an immense amount of support from Iran during the civil war in Yemen. Iran has supplied increasingly sophisticated weapons to the Houthis, especially after Saudi Arabia intervened in the civil war. Initially, Iran sent large numbers of small arms like AK-47s and RPGs to the Houthis, but they've now escalated in recent years to sending them various ballistic missiles and cruise missiles that have been used in attacks against Saudi Arabia. Most notably, however, is the introduction of so-called kamikaze drones. That is, drones that are single-use and are essentially a flying bomb. Iran has sent a large number of their Shahed series drones to the Houthis. These drones are relatively cheap to manufacture and are simple to use, allowing Iran to train large numbers of Houthi fighters in their use. While the Houthis have used more conventional weapons against foreign vessels, such as anti-ship missiles, these loitering drones have now been made front and center. Now we need to look at why the Houthis have begun this recent campaign against commercial shipping in the Red Sea. In short, they're attempting to target vessels that are bound for Israel or owned by Israeli companies in an effort to support Hamas and their ongoing war against Israel. These attacks are likely being directed and or encouraged by Iran, since both the Houthis and Hamas have received large amounts of funding and armaments from the Iranians. In truth, the current crisis in the Middle East likely has been orchestrated from Tehran since the very beginning. While I will cover the effects of the recent attacks in greater detail, it's important to examine the importance of the Red Sea to international trade. Hundreds of commercial vessels pass through the Red Sea every week with destinations in Asia and Africa, or seeking to transit the Suez Canal to reach Europe and North Africa. This route cuts days to weeks off travel time, since ships don't have to travel around the southern tip of Africa. Also important to note is that the Israeli port of Eilat is located on the Red Sea and is Israel's only Red Sea port. This saves vessels bound for Israel from having to cross the Suez Canal to reach Israeli ports on the Mediterranean. All vessels entering or leaving the Red Sea must pass through the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb between Yemen and Djibouti, that has a width of only 16 miles and is extremely close to Houthi territory. For even more context, the U.S. Navy has 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers located in the Red Sea as part of the multinational Combined Task Force 153. The task force contains a total of 11 ships, the 3 from the United States, 6 from the UK, 1 from Italy, and 1 from France. The goal of this task force is to provide maritime security to commercial shipping. The Houthis have attacked vessels in the past, but never with the intensity that they have in the last month. Now for the timeline of events leading us to where we are at the making of this video. On October 7th, Hamas launched its attack on Israel, killing hundreds and precipitating the Israel-Hamas war. Israel's ground invasion of Gaza began on October 27th. Earlier, on October 19th, the Houthis launched at least 4 cruise missiles and 15 kamikaze drones at Israel. These were intercepted over the Red Sea by the destroyer USS Carney. It was the first action involving the United States since the Israel-Hamas war began. On October 31st, at least 1 Houthi ballistic missile and several cruise missiles were intercepted by Israeli defenses. November saw the greatest escalation by the Houthis. On November 8th, a U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone was shot down by Houthi forces near the coast of Yemen. The Houthis continued to launch intermittent attacks against Israel, most of which were intercepted by U.S. or Israeli forces. November 19th would see the Houthis escalate the conflict in a major way. The Houthis launched a sophisticated attack on the 48,000-ton car carrier Galaxy Leader. As you can see in the footage on screen, the Houthis utilized an Mi-17 helicopter to drop several of their fighters on board in order to seize the ship, which they did successfully. The ship could carry up to 4,500 cars, but was empty at the time of the hijacking. The 25 crew members were captured, and the ship was taken to the port of Al Hudaydah in Yemen, where it is still being held. The Houthis mistakenly believed the ship was Israeli, but was in fact operated by a Japanese company. The ship does have a loose connection to an Israeli businessman. On November 24th, the cargo ship CMA-CGM Simi was struck by a drone. No casualties were reported, and there was damage to the ship but was able to continue sailing under its own power. The ship had ties to an Israeli billionaire. On November 26th, the oil tanker Central Park, with ties to another Israeli businessman, came under attack by a group of 5 individuals. The crew was able to barricade themselves inside a panic room, and the destroyer USS Mason responded to their distress call. After arriving on scene, the Mason demanded the release of the vessel, and the 5 individuals disembarked and attempted to escape on board a skiff. They were pursued by the Mason and ultimately surrendered. On December 3rd, the British-owned bulk carrier Unity Explorer was struck by an anti-ship missile. No casualties were reported, and only moderate damage was done to the ship. That same day, another British-owned vessel, the container ship No. 9, was also struck by an anti-ship missile with no casualties and minor damage. The Panamanian flagship, the Sophie II, was also struck by an anti-ship missile with no casualties. The next attack occurred 9 days later on December 12th, when the Norwegian tanker Strinda was struck by an anti-ship missile that ignited a fire on board. Again, there were no casualties. The next day, a hijacking attempt was made on the Marshall Islands flagged tanker Ardmore Encounter. This was thwarted by the USS Mason. The Mason also intercepted 2 missiles and a drone headed towards the ship. On December 15th, the Liberian flagged container ship Al Jasra was struck by a drone with no casualties. Another Liberian flagship, the Platinum III, was also struck by a ballistic missile. Finally, on December 18th, the British-owned Swan Atlantic was struck by a drone and a ballistic missile, and again had no casualties. In all, 11 attacks have been made by the Houthis towards vessels in the Red Sea. Many more have been prevented by the American and coalition vessels in the Red Sea. Now let's look at the effects of the attacks. Fortunately, there have been no deaths or serious injuries from the attacks, and none of the vessels that have been hit have been crippled or sunk. Despite this, numerous major companies have opted to cease all shipments through the Red Sea. Among these are Maersk, Evergreen Marine Corporation, Hapag-Lloyd, Mediterranean Shipping, BP, and CMA-CGM. These companies account for hundreds of ships, though of course not all pass through the Red Sea. These companies are now routing their ships around Africa, adding up to 2 weeks onto their voyages. In addition to companies making the decision not to traverse the Red Sea at all, insurance rates have skyrocketed on ships that do. In some cases, they have more than doubled, and in the case of Israeli ships, insurance rates have gone up 250%, if they can even get insurance. While dozens of ships continue to pass through the Red Sea, they do so knowing there's a risk of attack. Perhaps most notably, the Israeli port of Eilat has seen a massive reduction in commercial traffic, since shipments from Asia don't seem to want to risk passing by Yemen. This all has led to the United States announcing Operation Prosperity Guardian on December 18th. The exact forces involved are unknown at this time, but at least 3 additional U.S. destroyers, along with an additional British destroyer, are believed to be adding to Combined Task Force 153. As of the making of this video, there has been no direct retaliation against the Houthis, though an American carrier strike group is in the Persian Gulf and certainly could carry out attacks against the Houthis. For now, I'll continue to monitor the situation and bring you any updates as they come. In the meantime, please be sure to like the video, and I'll see you on the next one.